Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today I'm doing a Sky Striker deck profile. So I'm super excited for this one because we just got Sky Striker Widow Anchor back at 2. So I'm really excited for getting Widow Anchor back at 2 because that'd make the deck just get that little bit more power through the deck to be able to go into some more plays and be able to take our opponent's monsters, link them away, and do all sorts of fun stuff with the deck, which is really cool. With multi-roll being at 1 still, it's still really good because you basically have 4 Widow Anchors instead of just 2 now. So let's get straight on this, guys. But before we do, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon and the Ko-Fi down in the description if you guys would like to donate to the channel. And let's get straight on the deck. So first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Sky Striker Ace Ray. So Sky Striker Ace Ray, her particular ability is that you quick effect tribute her, and then special summon a Sky Striker Ace monster from your graveyard. And if this face-up Sky Striker Ace link, if a face-up Sky Striker Ace Link monster you control is destroyed by battle, or you can special summon this card, and you can only use the effect of Sky Striker Ace Ray once per turn. So basically, she just replaces all of, like, Kangari if she gets destroyed by battle or something like that. You just instantly put her back on the field like she dropped the suit, and so you can actually go into another monster. Then I played 2 copies of Sky Striker Ace Rose. She's a really good card too, but I feel like 2 is plenty of her. I wanted to play her at 3 because I was like, man, this deck doesn't have a lot of monsters in it, but I feel like 2 is just fine. If a Sky Striker Ace monster is normal or special summoned, except for an Ace Rose, you can special summon this card from your hand. And if an opponent's monster, if an opponent's monster in the extra monster zone is destroyed by battle or leaves the field because of a card effect while this card's in your graveyard, you can special summon this card. You can special summon this card, and you can negate the effects of 1 face-up monster your opponent controls until the end phase of the turn. This card really helps out with Sky Striker Ace Zeke, which is really cool with the new Zeke Link spell, or the Link monster, which is really, really cool. So I'm really excited to be able to play this card at 2. Then we're going to be playing 3 copies of Ash Blossom for the last 3 monsters. You really just need the 3 Ash Blossoms in here. You could play a couple more hand traps if you wanted to, but I really wanted to focus the deck a little bit more around drawing and a little bit more around the spell card aspect, and I have some really interesting spell cards in here that are really going to help out this deck. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells, where the deck really starts to excel. So first off, we're going to be playing 2 copies of Pot of Desires. The Pot of Desires just really help us draw into our cards as quickly as possible, because you really need to dig into the deck to get to the monsters that you really, really need in the deck and the spells that you really, really need in the deck. Now, this card can backfire sometimes because you will banish your copy of multi-roll, so you want to use this card after you use your copy of like Shizuku or something like that. But this card really helps out as a 2 of just drawing and digging into the deck. Then we're going to be playing 3 copies of Call by the Grave. The Call by the Graves really help out as well because you're basically drawing and digging deeper, of stopping your opponent from letting you dig deeper into the deck, because you really want to dig into the deck to be able to get what you need out of the deck quickly. Then we're playing a single copy of Rhoda because it helps us get more of our Sky Strikers to our hands, because they're all warrior monsters, which really helps out. 1 copy of Mind Control. Since we don't have 3 copies of Widow Anchor, we do have the 1 copy of Mind Control, which really helps out in the deck to be able to use that Mind Control to be able to take your opponent's monster. 1 copy of Monster Reborn because it is a spell card and helps out getting your Sky Strikers back on the field, so you can use them as link material for other Sky Striker Aces. 1 copy of Metal Foes Fusion. We use this card with our copy of Foolish Burial Goods to send it to the graveyard so we can get some additional value out of our deck, being able to put this card back into the deck and drawing an additional card. 1 copy of Terraforming because we're going to be able to grab our copies of the Area 0 with this card. 1 copy of Pot of Avarice. Now, the reason I play Pot of Avarice at 1 in this deck is because, yes, it is at 3, but you're never going to resolve it 3 times. It helps you by putting your Link monsters back in your extra deck that you've used, and it also helps you by putting your Sky Striker Aces back in your deck that you've used as well, where you want to keep like 1 copy of Rose, 1 copy of your Ray in the graveyard, but you don't want to have like multiple copies of them in the grave, so you shuffle them back with your Link monster so you can kind of out-resource your opponent. Then we play 2 copies of Mystical Space Typhoon. The reason I play Mystical Space Typhoon over the copy of Cosmic Cyclone is because you can pop Area 0 with it instead of being able to just banish something and paying 1,000. I really wanted to play this version of the deck anyways. Then for the last 2 generic spells, we're playing 2 copies of Foolish Burial Goods because the Foolish Burial Goods really help out to send our copy of Metal Foes Fusion to the graveyard. Now, I will mention, you guys, since we do play a lot of 1-ofs in the deck, if you don't want to play the Pot of Desires, I'm not a big fan of Pot of Desires, but I do like it in this deck. But if you want to drop the 2 Pot of Desires, you can drop drop them. I do have a card in the extra deck is the reason why I play it. But you can drop the Pot of Desires if you want to and play an Upstart Goblin and another copy of Foolish Burial Goods if you want to go that route and play 3 and 1 Upstart Goblin, and you'll be totally fine in all that. So that's it for the generic spells. Let's get into the Sky Striker spells. So for the Sky Striker spells, we're going to be playing a single copy of Sky Striker Mecha Hornet Drones. So Hornet Drones was the first card that got limited on the list with this deck. And what this card does is if you control no monsters in your main monster zone, you can special summon a Sky Striker Ace token that's a level 1/0/0. And if you have 3 spell cards in your graveyard, if you have at least 3 spell cards in your graveyard, you can make the attack and defense of the token become 1500, which is pretty cool. We play a single copy of Eagle Booster. You can target one of your face-up monsters, and for the rest of the turn, it's unaffected by card effects. And if you have 3 or more spells, it can't be destroyed by battle either, which is really cool. I really like that ability because it makes it so like your Sky Striker is completely invulnerable to everything. We play a single copy of Multi-Roll. Multi-Roll is such a good card in this deck. I really think that they need to bring this card back to like 2 if they're going to keep Engage banned, or give us 1 Engage. Maybe 1 Engage would be fine. And maybe 1 more Multi-Roll to make the deck a little bit more, you know, have a little less fragile, to be honest. But once per turn, you can target 1 other card in you control and send it to the graveyard. And also your opponent can activate cards or effects in the response to this card's spell activation. For the rest of the turn, even if this card leaves the field and you do not gain the previous effect once per turn. And then once per turn, during the end phase, you can set Sky Striker spells with different names from your graveyard up to the number of Sky Striker spells you activated this turn. And then when this card on the field, when they leave the field, you banish them as well. So basically, you get to use all your Sky Striker spells twice, which is really cool. We play a single copy of Hercules Base, which lets us special summon it lets us equip it to a monster, but it can't attack directly, but it can attack twice and during each battle phase. And if the equipped monster destroys a monster or battle, while you have 3 or more spells in the graveyard, you can draw a card. And if this card is sent to the field to the graveyard, you can target up to 3 Sky Striker cards in your graveyard and shuffle them back in the deck, which is really cool. I play 2 copies of Sky Striker Maneuver Jamming Wave. Jamming Wave is really cool at 2 because it lets you target a set spell or trap on the field and destroy it, which sometimes can be your own. Like you set a copy of Area 0, pop it, and then you can, if you have 3 or more spells in the graveyard, you can destroy a monster on the field. So usually you're going to pop your opponent's monster. So I played this as a 2 of, just to be able to pop my opponent's monsters. 2 copies of Afterburner. Afterburner is really nice because it lets you destroy a monster on the field, and if you have 3 or more spells in the graveyard, you can destroy a spell or trap on the field if you want to. 2 copies of Shark Cannon. Shark Cannon is so good in this deck because what it does is if you control no monsters in your main monster zone, you can target a monster in your opponent's graveyard and banish it. And you have 3 or more spells in your graveyard, you can special summon it, but it can't attack, which can help you link climb into a really big link monster like a Boral Sword or something like that you want to go into. I played 2 copies of Widow Anchor. Thank God that this card went back to 2. I'm so glad that this card went back to 2. If you have no spell or if you have no monsters in main monster zone, you can target 1 face-up effect monster on the field and negate that face-up monster's effect until the end phase of the turn. And then if you have 3 or more spells in your graveyard, you can take control of the monster as well, which is super cool. And then we play 2 copies of Area 0. The Area 0 is the field spell that basically lets you target one other card you control, excavate the top 3 from your deck, and if you do, you get to add 1 of the excavated Sky Striker cards from your deck to your hand and shuffle the rest back in your deck. And then if this card is in your field zone is sent to the graveyard, you can special summon a Sky Striker Ace from your deck, which can be like Rose or your Ray, either one from your deck. But I only play it as a 2-0 because you don't want to draw into like 3 copies of it, because once you activate it 1 time, you're good. This card helps us search the into multi-roll and stuff like that and Widow Anchor, but I really only feel like you need 2 copies of it. I feel like 2 is plenty. So that's it for the spells, guys. Sky Striker spells. Let's get into the traps. We do actually play 3 traps in here, and that is 3 copies of There Can Only Be One, which we play 3 of, ironically. I'm really surprised that this card evaded the ban list. This card should actually, in my opinion, be limited. But each time, this card can really shut down a lot of games, because basically what you do is you just flip this, and your Sky Striker monsters in the main deck are warriors, and your monsters in the extra deck are machines. So you can control this and a copy of your Ace Ray, which is really cool, and I really like that ability. And a lot of the monsters that we special summon that are link 4s, 3s, and stuff like that, they're different types as well. So basically, if you flip this against like Rockets, Salad, Mangrates, Zombies, anything like that, it really, really cripples the deck, and you can really go after your opponent with like your Kangaris, Hayates, and stuff like that. So this deck really, really thrives with there can only be one at 3. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Sky Striker Ace Kangari. Kangari really helps out because you can special summon one you have to use a Sky Striker Ace to go into any of your Sky Striker monsters. But basically what this card does is if it's special summoned, you can target one of your Sky Striker spells in your graveyard and add it back to your hand, and it gains 100 attack for each spell in your graveyard, which can get really big really quickly. And it really helps out to be able to get her really big. We play 3 copies of Shizuku. Shizuku and Kangari kind of work together all really well because monsters your opponent control lose 100 attack for each spell in your graveyard, and then once per turn during the end phase, if this card was special summoned this turn, you can add a Sky Striker spell from your deck to your hand, which is usually going to be multi-roll because you want to start rolling with that multi-roll to get your Sky Striker the maximum value out of your spells. We play 3 copies of Hayate as well. Hayate at 3 is a necessity at this point because it can attack your opponent directly, which does a lot of damage. And then also, if this card attacks your opponents directly after damage calculation, you can send a Sky Striker card from your deck to the graveyard, which could be a copy of Rose, so you can trigger the Rose's ability later on. Or it can be one of your spells to get that 3rd spell that you need in the graveyard. We just play a single copy of Kaina. Kaina is just a 1-of to me because she lets you gain life points, and you can target a monster your opponent controls, and it can't attack until the end phase of your opponent's turn. And then each time a Sky Striker spell or effect is activated, you gain 100 life points immediately after that resolves. She's probably the worst one of them all, but you play her to 1-of. We play a single copy of Zeke. Zeke is really good, and it's the new one. It's a reason I wanted to do an update of this deck besides Widow Anchor, but I really like Zeke because her effect is that she must be link summoned, and you can only special summon Zeke once per turn, and then once per turn, if this card is link summoned, you can target one monster on the field and banish it into your opponent's next end phase, which can help you get rid of a really pesky card that they may have on the field. And then once per turn, you can target one other card you control, and this card gains 1,000 attack, and then send the card to the graveyard, and it doesn't specify that she loses the attack points, so she automatically goes up to 2,500, and from my knowledge, stays at 2,500, which is really cool and just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so this card is a really good 1-of in the deck. Then we play a single copy of Hinata, the Fire Charmer. This card, the Fire Charmer Ablaze, is really good in here because you can link summon it away with like a copy of one of your Sky Strikers and a single copy of Kangari. So it's a really good card, or something that you gobble up with Widow Anchor or something like that, Mind Control, anything, or Shark Cannon. But this card's really good to link away with that. 1 copy of Ningirutsu because this card lets you pop stuff, which is really helpful. Boral Sword is a 1-of because it helps you OTK. And then my own personal tech card that I've really enjoyed playing in this card deck because it helps me OTK like crazy is a single copy of Zeroboros. Zeroboros is a really surprise card that you might not think about playing in this deck, but you cannot normal summon or set to the extra monster zone this card points to. So like if you have these zones, you're not going to summon them anyways because this is going to be the OTK. This is the final hurrah. And the reason I play Desires in this deck is because this card, because it gains 200 attack for each banished card. So if you activate Desires, this card gains 2,000 attack essentially. So you're immediately going to summon a 5,000 attack point monster, which is really cool. And if another monster is special summoned to a zone this card points to, while this card is on the field, you banish all other cards on the field, and then once per turn during the standby phase of the next turn after this card was banished, by its own effect, you special summon this banished card. This card comes in really handy, and I'm really, like, this card is so good in this deck with Desires. Like, this card is really good to be able to OTK your opponent. I actually go into this a lot more often than I go into Boral Sword because it catches my opponent completely off guard, because they may have a link monster that's pointing like downward, like the Hinata one does, where it points downward, where it's pointing to position 3, and I'll point at the same zone, and it's like, yeah, you're going to summon there? Really? And then they will, and they won't realize it, and then it'll banish everything, or they will forget, and then drop the card, and I'm like, hey, banish everything. And then I special summon this back, and I OTK them. So this card's a really good OTK maker. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. It's a really fun deck to play around with. I highly recommend that you guys give this deck a try. It's really neat to play around with Sky Strikers now that we have 2 Widow Anchors. And the deck is fairly cheap now. One of the reasons I built this deck was because it's so cheap now, because they pretty much ban everything. Like they banned Engage, they limited multi-roll, they semi-limited Widow Anchor, and they limited Hornet Drones as well. So, like, we have 3 cards that are limited, 1 that's semi-limited, and 1 that's banned. So, like, the deck's kind of like in a really good spot and bad spot because it can get better. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Hit the bell on there so you can become part of the notification squad. Definitely tell me what you think of this deck profile down in the comments down below. And I'll see you guys in the next video. See you around, guys.